All right, so yesterday someone left a comment for me to do a video on a sci-fi series from like the mid 2010s, right? It's called Asylum. And in this particular world, the rich have moved to to a space station above Earth where they have all of their luxuries and they have access to sophisticated healthcare, while everyone on Earth is left to scavenge for themselves. And it's not a concept that's far fetched. In fact, in the entire world right now, when you think about people who don't have money for the basics, and then you look at where rich people live inside of compounds, inside of elusive, exclusive neighborhoods, so they can live their lives as far removed from poor people as humanly possible. In fact, rich people, the only time that they interact with poor people are going to be the people that cut their grass or clean their pools or make their food or paint their nails. They have very little access to the way that we live. And this is, in fact, something you notice when politicians talk about poor people problems, is that they're so removed from day to day life that they don't understand that you can't really survive on $100,000 anymore and be comfortable. In fact, that number is probably going to grow to between 250,000 and $500,000 in the next 5 years. And we still have a federal minimum wage of $7.25. So you tell me, if it's going to take over $100,000 a year to $500,000 a year, how is someone who's making $7 an hour supposed to live? Because we know that the divide is on between us is so big that it can never be closed. The only way that we can try to fix the current problem is by eliminating the current system, a complete and total reset. Otherwise, it's just going to continue to get worse because money doesn't trickle down, it trickles up. And the scary thing is that with inflation getting ready to rise on everything, that they're not going to raise wages. They're just going to watch their employees just suffer more and more and more because they don't care if you can't afford to eat or you can't afford to go to the doctor or take time off or even slow down to catch a rest. I mean, it's been years since I've had an actual day off. Like last week when I took those 2 days off from work, I've never worked harder in my life to move every item that I own from one piece of crap apartment to another piece of crap apartment. And it was hard work. I can still feel the exhaustion in my body. But on top of that, I feel the exhaustion in my soul when I stop and think about how hard I'm going to have to work until they put me in the ground if I'm lucky. But with that said, let's get into our monologue really quick. So, the scariest part about the rich versus the poor divide isn't just the money, it's that they're building a whole different world without us. They don't want to fix a system, they want to escape it. While we're down here fighting over rent and hospital bills, they're floating above it, all in their version of paradise. And if we don't start paying attention, there won't be anything left for us except the scraps and survival. No matter where you go on earth, there are going to be poor people and there are going to be rich people. And every place on earth where rich people live, I consider to be the first world. America is no longer a first world country for the vast majority of the people, and it hasn't been for a long time. Telling yourself that at least you live in a first world country while you're living in Oakland, California, when you look at miles and miles of people living on the side of the road or living in homes that should have been condemned or just on the street in tents along the the main roads in your city. Like here in Phoenix, we had the zone that housed around 2,000 people. They had everything. They built their own little like slab city. They even had tents set up for the Devil's Tango. So they created their own little garbage world. And of course, the business owners didn't like their garbage world. And so they petitioned the city to get rid of it. And they bulldozed it. Same way they chased them out of the bottom of the Tempe Town Lake. People didn't like having to see those people living like that on the side of the road because it makes you feel bad. One of the greatest motivators that I have to go to work every day is driving past the Circle K and seeing all the homeless people hanging out. They really are there to intimidate the rest of us into working because we don't want to work. We have to work. And the way that they can scare us into working is by having the direct consequences of what happens to you if you can't find a job or you don't want to work. Talking point number one, it's not just about having more stuff, it's about having a completely different life. Rich people don't wait in lines, they don't worry about medical bills, they don't get stuck in traffic or live next to landfills. They've designed their world to never touch ours. And I have witnessed this on many occasions, but the one area where I've seen it the most is at South Mountain. I think it's about 24th Street and Baseline. It's leading up to South Mountain Park. And on one side, you have 30-foot gates and $1 million homes. On the other side of the street, classic American ghetto. Rich people have to look over there and see, and the opposite is true too. The poor people have to look at those giant gates and think to themselves, it's like, why am I on this side? Because I ask myself that question all the time. Why am I on this side? Why can't I be on that side? Because it's people, the elite people, who can afford to live in those homes. And I've always thought about it this way. Once you make a certain amount of money, regardless of what they raise the prices to, it doesn't matter. Think of the yacht that someone like Bezos drives around, or the yacht that the Apple owner, I forget what her name is, but Steve Jobs built a yacht that looks like an iPhone in the same colors, white and black. And these yachts cost hundreds of millions of dollars. But when you have that much money, buying a mansion, buying a yacht, buying expensive cars, it's equivalent to us walking into a grocery store and buying a candy bar. They have so much money that money doesn't matter anymore to them. They just point at what they want. And when you live in a world where money doesn't matter, once you reach a certain status of financial success, money doesn't matter. But on the opposite spectrum of that, when you're a person like myself, or you're a person making a lot less money, you count every single penny. When you walk into the grocery store, you're looking for a discount. You're looking for yellow tags. You're looking for sale items. Because at the bottom, we worry about everything. We worry about how we're going to cover our grocery bills, how we're going to pay for the Promobile. Is there going to be enough time this month in order to get a second paycheck to help cover the rent? Those are the kinds of things that we think about down here. We're always struggling to find new ways of making more money because every single dollar counts to us. And unfortunately, this double standard in the world is the way that they are able to live such exclusive lives. Money doesn't matter to them anymore. They don't go to work. They don't put in a 40-hour work week. Sure, they claim that they working so many hours, but they're not down there making fries or digging a ditch. They're just overseeing their corporations and their investments as they bring in money And sorry to use this pun, but by the boatload into their lives. If one of their businesses fails, they just write it off and just move on to the next more successful business. This is why this system is so broken, because unless they're making record profits, they don't care. The second they're not making, they're ending up even at the end of the year, or they're just not making as much money as they want, they'll close that business and fire every worker. We've seen this in our society over and over again as large businesses, oh, okay, we're not going to make money. Well, guess what? Let's get rid of these thousands of workers. Car companies right now, oh, we're shifting manufacturing to a different source. Just fire everyone. They don't care if you don't have a job. And good luck trying to find any halfway decent job right now while the market is saturated with people being laid off or companies just closing down. And this is the best example that I can use. The restaurant industry, at least the fast food industry, is going out. We all know that. But think about the thousands upon thousands, maybe tens of thousands, maybe even millions of jobs that have been lost in this country inside of malls. Every one of those stores employed at least 5 to 10 people, and now they're all gone. Meaning those people have to go to other industries or go to other locations to find entry level jobs. Talking point number two, the rich have literal machines that cure cancer instantly uh, today. Okay, so this actually started out with the name of that show, the Elysium, and it claims that they have machines that can cure things instantly. People are dying from treatable diseases because they can't afford care. The modern world isn't suffering from a lack of resources, it's suffering from a lack of access. So, I was talking to Mello, I believe it was Mello, and we were talking about people who are still around, right? Like, I think it was Magic Johnson who got AIDS in the 80s, I think, and he's still around. And Mello was telling me about an episode of South Park where they said the cure for everything is money. And it's so true. Because if you don't have money, you don't have access to medical insurance because your job doesn't offer it because it's part time, you could end up getting sick from a paper cut. And because you don't have access to basic medical care, you could end up going into the hole because you got an infected paper cut. That's how terrible the medical system is in this country. Because if you have a job, that makes you unqualified for food stamps, makes you unqualified for free medical care. The amount of loops of hoops you have to jump through in order to get food stamps or access to free medical care or even Section 8 housing is ridiculous. I've talked to the ladies that work at the Kroger's for the past few years that are all trying to get Section 8 housing, and there's a waiting list a mile long to get access to a home because there's so many people that need all of these resources that they have to put in barriers. Trying to get unemployment benefits is a grueling process, and it's intentional. Rich people in the government don't want you accessing those things unless you try really, really hard. I remember during the pandemic, if you wanted to try to get in to the unemployment line after you lost your job, you were there up to 8 hours a day on hold waiting, only to hear someone pick up the phone, you hear the phone be answered, and then within seconds they hang up because they're overwhelmed. And you're just like, oh my God, I waited all day to talk to someone there, and they didn't even bother to say anything. And then you got to start that process again the next day, hoping to get in. But this is this access to resources in our world is just absolutely terrible. And the fact that the fourth leading cause of biting it in America is just being poor because you don't have access to anything good. Everything good costs money, right? If you put the word public in front of anything, In our society, it means it's of low quality. Public transportation, public schooling, public anything. And rich people don't use they how do I put it this way? If rich people could have their own highways, they would never use the same ones that the pros use. But let's move on to talking point number three really quick, because I'm running out of time and I got to get to work. Luxury bunkers, private islands, space flights, they're not hiding it anymore. The wealthiest people are actively preparing for a future without the rest of us. Climate crisis, economic collapse, they're ready. Are you? No, we don't have access to bunkers. Once we see the cloud in the distance, we're all going to become ghouls, and that's for the ones that survive. I mean, I'm ready to embrace my inner ghoul at this point, but not rich people. They're going to climb down into their bunkers, wait, and see what happens, and then give it some time, let the dust settle, and then come up and look at the millions of ghouls that are still left on the surface because they have the ability to hide. They have the ability to go to their private islands. They have the ability to go into space. We do not. Whatever happens here, we have to endure. Just like people who are caught outside during a blizzard, right? You're homeless and the weather outside turns bad. You better kiss your rear goodbye because your chances of making it aren't too good, especially here in Arizona once it starts getting hot. We can have up to 100 days plus. I think we had 150 days last year of 110 degrees plus. And it's tough to survive out there like that. But no one's coming to save you. No one's coming to say, you know what, it's cruel to let poor people sit out there in that kind of heat. And it's not too uncommon to see a person that's not with us anymore just sitting at a bus stop because the elements got them. And that's the extreme of the two. Is that when you're poor, you have no way of getting out of the out of harm's way, even when it comes to your living situation. I'm willing to bet there isn't a single person in my entire apartment complex. This apartment complex has 800 units, right? And they're spread across these properties over here. Not a single person would live here if they could afford better. We would all rather be 10 minutes up the road in those gated communities with the giant houses. That's where we would all live if this was a fair world, but it's not. There has to be losers. And the losers are the people that directly have to deal with the climate, with the economy, with the way that things are. The most dangerous person to you in your life is a person who's desperately seeking resources to stay alive. And these are the people that turn to alternative lifestyles in order to survive. All right, final talking point. Um, Elysium was supposed to be science fiction, but look around. Rising homelessness, gated communities, privatized healthcare, billionaire space programs, the line between fiction and reality is gone. I've been saying that for years. I had no idea that that was going to be my fourth talking point, but I've already touched on all of these things because it's easy to see. We know where rich people are because we can see their giant homes and their gates. We know that privatized healthcare is so much better. Going to the Mayo Clinic is going to make certain that you stay healthy as opposed to going to the county hospital with even a minor problem because you're not going to get the same quality. Our food, just taste poor people food. And you tell me that that doesn't taste like crap. I've got to this point, like last night, I was three sheets to the wind, and somehow I started remembering what Burger King tasted like when I was a kid. And I'm like, I remember eating things that tasted good. I remember life being the standard of living was better. Like, I don't remember my parents struggling as bad as I do, even though they didn't make much money. They were laborers. They worked My mom cleaned houses and my dad picked fruit or worked in construction. Traditional Hispanic jobs. But they had enough money. I myself run an entire area for this corporation and I struggle financially. And you're just kind of like, wait a minute. By the if my parents saw what I did for a living compared to what they were doing for a living, they'd be like, "Damn, millennials, team, you should be set." And you rub elbows with VPs and executives. You you know all about this technology. You manage an area. You should be financially successful, but I'm not. And that fact really bothers me most days. That truly that even success that would be measured on a scale from 20 years ago, my pay and my position would have been considered good. In today's world, it's not. Why? Because we've let things get this bad for us. And I don't think there's a way back. I think that as our society crumbles for poor people, that there's going to be a lot more people like me that are working significantly high level positions in technology, but are still going to end up going to a food kitchen at least a couple times a month. But I'll leave it at that because I got to get ready to go to Evil Corp. I hope you guys have a great day, and I will talk to you guys in the next one.